In the Earth's oldest and deepest memories, the existence of some lives is in itself a silent rebellion against the laws of time. He possessed a pair of sharp, colossal claws nearly 1 meter long, resembling the scythes of the Grim Reaper, which by all logic should have made him the most feared apex predator on the Cretaceous continent. Yet, when modern paleontologists pieced together his complete life trajectory from the hardened rock layers, they discovered a counterintuitive paradox that shocked the entire scientific community. This fierce-looking behemoth never once turned those giant scythes against any warm life throughout his existence, but instead lived as an ultra-slow, ultra-gentle ancient hermit. Tonight, by the flickering warmth of the hearth, with this story that requires no effort to remember, let us step into his true life. Segnosaurus momo. In cold fossil taxonomy, this name represents a unique therizinosaur that moved with extreme slowness and lived at the edges of floodplains. But in that perilous era 70 million years ago, filled with volcanic eruptions and the sharp teeth and claws of carnivorous dinosaurs, Momo used a near-static, ultra-slow rhythm to find an unimaginable tranquility for himself and everything around him amidst the Earth's most brutal fracturing. This is not a ledger glorifying bloody conquests, but a quiet, lingering song of how to surrender tension in a tempestuous era and reconcile with destiny through the absolute relaxation of the body before darkness falls. At the edge of the Gobi Plain in the late Cretaceous, the passage of time seemed stretched incredibly long, and the heavy, dry air was always permeated with the faint bitterness of bald cypress resin baked by the blazing sun. Driving Momo's destiny toward its first major turning point was a rare crustal movement that swept across the entire plain, causing large swathes of forest that had sheltered the clan for decades to collapse amidst the uplifting rock layers. The space for survival was compressed to the extreme in the blink of an eye, and the power dynamics within the clan became intensely strained overnight. Hunger drove the once gentle creatures to fight brutally until their heads bled for a few mouthfuls of shriveled leaves. To secure his absolute authority, the aging leader began to viciously bite and ostracize any young males who posed a potential threat, leaving the plain filled daily with painful cries. Momo stood right at the center of this storm. His 9-meter-long frame and that pair of giant claws gleaming with a grim, cold light in the sun could have easily allowed him to join that brutal gamble for survival and power. Yet, there was not a shred of the era's frenzy in his eyes. They were a pair of deep, clear, and even slightly detached black eyes. He watched silently as his once strong companions tore apart each other's beautiful feathers in internecine strife, blood staining the withered moss, the internal tension turning the entire forest into an anxiety-ridden slaughterhouse. At that moment, a specific wisdom belonging to a slow nature awakened deep within Momo. It was not an instinct to fight, but a profound weariness and restraint regarding endless plunder. He did not meet the old leader's violent gaze, which was filled with jealousy and intimidation, nor did he attempt to use his 1-meter claws to carve a bloody path to power. Instead, on a noon when the sunset bled red across the sky, he turned his massive frame with extreme slowness. Stepping on the cracking red earth, his movements were as slow as a gray stone sculpture shifting through time. Without a single trace of regret, he walked step by step away from that territory consumed by madness and headed into the desolate, silent wilderness. Shedding the protection of the clan meant Momo had to face those apex carnivores who roamed the dark nights and adhered to the fast-paced laws of predation entirely on his own. In this brutal, kill-or-be-killed reality, even a single second of hesitation could invite destruction, yet Momo stubbornly infused his slow rhythm into his very bones. He walked very slowly. With each step forward, his thick hind limbs needed to pause in midair for several full seconds, his wide feet landing on the dry gravel with dull, prolonged rustling sounds that carried a deeply therapeutic rhythm. That posture did not resemble traveling, rather, it felt as though he was using his body to stroke and perceive every pulse of this earth. This slowness, ironically, allowed him to generate a wondrous resonance with his surroundings. Finally, after crossing several dried river valleys rendered silent by drought, he halted within a secluded and lush thicket of giant ferns. This was a natural sanctuary enclosed tightly by towering sandstone canyons. The conflicts and storms of the outside world seemed to be ruthlessly deflected by those heavy rock walls as they drew near. It was now that tranquil moment when twilight transitions into night, and the evening glow was gradually fading its last vestige of warmth, turning into a deep, restrained violet blue laced with a melancholy hue. Momo sat down, his massive frame settling slowly onto a soft lawn naturally carpeted by giant kidney ferns, the soil yielding under his weight with an extremely gentle sigh of compression. The surrounding air began to grow somewhat damp and cool, as the last trace of sultry heat brought by the polar currents was silently drawn away by the night. The night wind passed through the fissures of the canyon, producing a resonance akin to the lowest register of a cello. Momo closed his eyes slightly. He paid no heed to the hollow roars drifting occasionally from the distant jungle, but simply sat stationary in his spot, welcoming the purest darkness of this ancient wilderness with his near-static silhouette. In modern fast-paced dinosaur popular culture, segnosaurs are often misunderstood as clumsy casualties destined for elimination due to incomplete evolution. People always assume that in a world of survival of the fittest, failing to run means death, but this arrogant perspective entirely fails to comprehend the grand wisdom disguised as clumsiness rooted deep within Momo's absolute strength. In the 3rd year after he settled in this sandstone canyon, late on a night of torrential downpours, danger inevitably breached the canyon's defenses and descended upon this silent haven. A massively built Tarbosaurus, driven to lose its reason by prolonged starvation, tracked the faint scent of life through the air and crept silently to the edge of Momo's campsite with muddy steps. It was a silent gamble of will, life, and death played out in extreme stillness. The torrential rain beat ruthlessly against the Tarbosaurus's gaping jaw, bristling with razor-sharp teeth, carrying waves of pungent blood scent and ravenous silence. The ancient cicadas that had been crying in the shadows tucked their wings completely at this instant, the surrounding thickets fell dead silent, and the moisture in the air seemed to freeze into solid ice within the carnivore's heavy breathing. Yet, faced with this terrifying envelopment that could frighten any small to medium species out of its wits, Momo displayed a near-sacred, hair-raising composure and calm. He did not even rush to stand up, nor did he unleash any provocative roars. Within the soft pile of fallen leaves, he merely turned his rounded head with extreme slowness, inch by inch. The moonlight pierced a rift in the dark clouds at this exact moment, perfectly illuminating Momo's pair of black eyes, which were as deep as ancient pools in the dark, and his 1-meter-long sickle claws hanging by his side like a row of polished battle blades. He did not initiate an attack, nor did he assume a defensive posture. He merely gazed at the colossal beast before him with that near slow-motion stance. There was no fear in that gaze, no anger, only an infinite, boundless emptiness and detachment that had seen through the cycles of life and death. The ferocious Tarbosaurus ground to a halt just a few meters away from Momo. Staring at that gray behemoth whose breathing rhythm had not faltered even a fraction amidst the pouring rain, and sensing the terrifying power locked within those giant claws capable of tearing its throat apart, the frenzy in its eyes was finally consumed bit by an unexperienced, unknown dread. Ultimately, it could only lower its head and retreat step by step back into the deep shadows of the dark storm. The storm finally subsided gradually in the closing hours of the deep night, the once violent downpour degrading into an exceedingly gentle, pattering polar night rain that beat softly against the large leaves of the giant tree ferns. The air was washed exceptionally clean, carrying a faint fragrance blended from green grass, damp soil, and ancient blossoms, highly suited for guiding a weary soul into the realm of dreams. With the titan-sized crisis averted, Momo completely surrendered himself once more to this tranquil canyon that belonged to him alone, his body beginning an intensely deep relaxation prior to sleep that lasted for several minutes. This was a unique life ritual belonging to a slow nature. Starting from the tip of his tail, he began to unwrap his massive muscle groups, section by section, with extreme slowness after they had been tensed all day. His neck was of a perfect length, and at this moment, it glided through the air with an elegant, fluid arc akin to Tai Chi, gently resting his head against an ancient tree trunk carpeted in soft moss. Following this was his pair of sickle claws that had once awed the Cretaceous. He did not clench them into tight fists, instead, like a giant leaf completely relaxed in the night wind, they hung loosely on either side of his body, the sharp tips of the talons sinking gently into the soft soil. With every inhalation, the warm, clean air traveled through his long trachea of several meters and swirled within his broad chest cavity, producing deep hums resembling wind blowing through empty mountain caverns. With every exhalation, he seemed to use his body as a medium to vent all the residual anxiety, tension, and the cost of survival from this land into the starry night sky, bit by bit. This breathing possessed an irresistible hypnotic magic. It was so slow that even the small mammals, who had been shivering in tree hollows out of sheer terror from the Tarbosaurus's intrusion, gradually lowered their guard within this sound. Listening to this massive, stable rhythm of life, they seemed to perceive the Earth's oldest and most reliable heartbeat. Their once perked ears began to droop slowly, and their bodies completely softened into the warm piles of dry grass. And amidst this repeated, increasingly faint, and slower breathing, Momo allowed the Earth's gravity to quietly cradle his frame of several tons. His eyelids grew as heavy as lead, and all the clamor of the surrounding world gradually faded from his perception, dissolving into a gentle void. The end of life to Momo brought neither heart-stopping disasters nor a tragic, fatalistic wail. It arrived just like his life, orderly, unhurried, and entirely natural. It was the conclusion of an ordinary dry season in the late Cretaceous. The air carried the faint bitterness and caramel-like aroma of plants lacking water, and the sky was as clean as a massive, flawless piece of black velvet. Momo was already too old. His joints had accumulated countless calcification marks left behind by the successions of seasons and shifts of heat and cold. Every movement of those giant claws required him to endure a blunt, heavy ache radiating from deep within his bones. He knew this ancient machine within him was slowly grinding to a halt, and that heart which had supported his peaceful life for decades was beginning to grow increasingly weary, the intervals between its beats astonishingly long. On a deep night when meteors fell like rain, he walked slowly to the deepest part of that fern depression that had accompanied him for the greater part of his life, where the ground felt as soft beneath his feet as the most expensive Persian carpet. Momo stood silently beneath the moonlight. He did not attempt to forage on the tender leaves high above as he did in his youth, but merely bent his limbs slowly and without a shred of lingering regret, letting his heavy abdomen rest completely against the volcanic ash sunbaked with warmth. He began to stack those 1-meter-long sickle claws neatly over his chest with a near-reverent slow motion, his beautiful feathers gleaming with a sacred, silver-threaded light under the moon's radiance. As his massive skeleton of several tons completed its final settlement into the soil, his mouth exhaled the last deep, prolonged sigh of his life, one filled with a sense of boundless liberation. The surrounding forest fell into absolute stillness in an instant, the wind died down, the leaves stopped swaying, and even the ancient cicadas that favored crying in the night tucked their wings at this moment, as if collectively witnessing a wise son of the earth stepping into eternity. Momo closed his eyes, his eyelashes bearing a final, crystalline drop of night dew that reflected the image of the entire universe under the starlight. His breathing grew lighter and slower, until no more airflow crossed that long trachea. 70 million years of time passed like a prolonged deluge, ruthlessly washing over every corner of this continent, flattening the former canyons, turning lush forests into deserts, and sending deserts into the deep sea. Momo's massive skeleton, under the gentle envelopment of silt and volcanic ash, underwent dissolution and mineralization, until every single vertebra and every heavy rib fused as one with the cold rock, becoming part of the Earth's own skeleton. When we stand today within the high, chilly exhibition halls of modern museums, gazing up at that fossil specimen several meters long bearing terrifying 1-meter claws, we are often only shocked by that immediate sense of ancient ferocity. But please try to close your eyes, forget those empty academic terms, and forget those cold hypotheses regarding mass extinctions. Return once more to that Cretaceous night filled with brilliant stars where Momo chose to lie down in slow motion. Through the vast duration and restraint of his life, Segnosaurus Momo proved to this world that truly powerful strength never requires roars and slaughter to validate itself, it is often contained within the deepest silence and yielding. Now, that ancient river valley has long dried up, and those tall conifers have long since become coal deep underground, but the breathing rhythm Momo left behind on that night seems to still echo faintly beneath the night sky of modern cities. In this modern world filled with anxiety, where everyone is running desperately and pressed to breathlessness by life, this story of an ancient giant-clawed beast bowing its head in the twilight and unfolding its body in slow motion under the moonlight can perhaps become a haven for your soul. There is no need to contemplate tomorrow's toil, nor any need to heed those pointless disputes and misunderstandings. The earth will quietly cradle your weary frame with the gentlest gravity and the boundless night, just as it accepted Momo. The pillow is radiating an ideal temperature, and the bedding possesses the most reassuring sense of envelopment. Listening to this story that requires no effort to remember, let that long, deep breathing guide you to slowly, close your eyes. Good night, Momo the Segnosaurus, good night, to every soul that sheds its defenses and finds peace in the dark.